Welcome to this video about the one thing. This book right here is one of my most favorite books ever. It not only helps you to be the most productive person that you know, but it really gives you a blueprint to create something out of nothing. So that's really what we need when we're building a business. We have a bunch of ideas about what success and productivity looks like, but what's great about this book, they actually give science and reasons behind why certain things are actually not the case, certain concepts that we have as a society about productivity. There is so many parts about this book that I absolutely love, but I really want this review to go over the most important concepts and meaningful things that I took from it. And I'm pretty much just going to go over parts that I marked up that were like, this is important, tell people about this. So this first one is part of the basic principles. Extraordinary success is sequential and not simultaneous, like dominoes. The key is that over time, success is built sequentially. It's one thing at a time, hence the namesake of this book. The next part is about productivity lies. When everything feels urgent and important, everything seems equal. We become active and busy, but this doesn't actually move us any closer to success. Activity is often unrelated to productivity, and busyness rarely takes care of business. So that reminds me of people that we know in life that are always doing stuff, but then at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month, you're like, what did you do though? Achievers operate differently though. They have an eye for the essential. They pause just long enough to decide what matters and then allow what matters to drive their day. Remember to not focus on being busy, but focus on being productive. And don't get trapped in the checkoff game. I definitely struggle with this. Especially I use Asana and I just kind of tick things off and it feels so satisfying to just be like, check, this is done, check, check, check. Almost to the point where initially when I started doing this years ago, I would create unnecessary tasks and be like, well, got that done. It's kind of ridiculous, and I'm glad that I don't do it anymore. This next part is about multitasking. So here he says, but it turns out that high multitaskers are suckers for irrelevancy. This author is not a fan of multitasking, even though it seems like it would be very highly productive. There's science behind this. Researchers estimate that workers are interrupted every 11 minutes and then spend almost a third of their day recovering from these distractions. Task switching exacts a cost that few realize that they're even paying. I'm actually going to take the liberty of calling this the reorientation cost. If you think about it, like say you're checking email and then someone comes up to you in the middle of it and is like, hey, da 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 da, and you're like, oh, noted, okay, cool. And then you go back and you're like, okay, where was I? Was I here? All that time, you took time to figure out where you were in that task. And that's just for email. So for something that's bigger, that requires more cognitive processing, you're gonna spend even more time going like, okay, wait, where was I in this project? And then you start going, oh, okay, nope, I already did that. That actually has a cost, and time is the most precious commodity. So this is why it takes time to reorient yourself. Our brain has different channels, and as a result, we're able to process different kinds of data in different parts of our brain. This is why you can talk and walk at the same time. There's no channel interference. There's a certain part of your brain that's in charge of walking and a certain part of your brain that's in charge of talking. They don't interfere. But a lot of the tasks that we do interfere, which means you're doing a bunch of things half-ass when you're multitasking and doing things that require the same brain channel. This is actually, a lot of this is done in the prefrontal cortex. Visual cortex is another. Here is one thing though that the author Gary Keller said with Jay Papasan said that I don't really agree with. He said for whatever reason the results are unambiguous. Multitasking slows us down and makes us slower witted. Maybe he's got a bunch of science behind that. I'm more in like, I need to see more data on that. Now we have discipline, and this part's really hard for me because I grew up with very little discipline, so it does not come natural. Here's what he says. Success is actually a short race, a sprint fueled by discipline, just long enough for a habit to kick in and take over. We want to be able to do something enough to where we are able to establish that habit, but not do it so much that it takes over our life and we're so frustrated that we just quit. He actually writes that 66 days is the average that it takes after a study that they did to establish a new habit. That's it. Super successful people are not superhuman at all. They're not robots. They probably don't have any AI other than maybe like a bionic knee. They've just used selected discipline to develop a few significant habits, one at a time, over time. Willpower. Yes. Okay, this was actually really interesting. He basically did he didn't do it. Who did this? 1981, 60s and early 70s researcher Walter Mischel at the Stanford University Being Nursery School did a study on over 500 children about marshmallows. And you may have heard about this, but he basically said that they put one marshmallow in front of a kid and they said, you can eat this marshmallow now, or they leave the room and you stay certain period of time. There was a certain period of time that if they wait, they get 2 marshmallows. So what they noticed is that the kids that had the willpower to wait to get 2 marshmallows instead of the instant gratification of 1 marshmallow, that actually, and they studied these kids over a long period of time. Willpower, or the ability to delay gratification, was a huge indicator of future success. I actually did this experiment with my 6-year-old, and he took the 2 marshmallows. I'm so proud of him, but it really depends on the day. And that's where we get into the next part, is that willpower is actually a timing issue. Although character is an essential element of willpower, the key to harnessing it is when you use it. So he said everyone accepts that limited resources must be managed, yet we fail to recognize that willpower is actually one of them. The more that we use our mind and our willpower, the less minding power we have. Willpower is like a fast twitch muscle that gets tired and needs rest. As Kathleen Vohs puts it in Prevention magazine in 2009, willpower is like gas in your car. When you resist something tempting, you use some up. The more you resist, the emptier your tank gets until you run out of gas. Very interesting. So here are some things that use up gas in your tank that takes a lot of willpower. Implementing new behaviors, filtering out distractions, resisting temptation, suppressing emotion, restraining aggression, suppressing impulses, taking tests, trying to impress others, coping with fear, doing something you don't enjoy, and selecting long-term over short-term rewards. On any given day, you have a limited supply of willpower, so decide what matters and reserve your willpower for it. Now we have work-life balance, and this part was crazy interesting to me because I never feel like I can really get that work-life balance. I usually feel like, okay, I'm so productive today, but then my relationship falls apart, or I don't spend enough time with my kid, or I spend all that time and then I don't get work done. And it turns out that according to Gary Keller with Jay Papasan, it is impossible. Work-life balance is kind of a lie. He believes in counterbalance. The reason we shouldn't pursue balance is that the magic never happens in the middle. Magic happens at the extremes. So he actually has graphs for this, because that probably doesn't make sense if you've never heard of it. So this is work-life balance when you're just like, I do a little work, I do a little family, I do a little work, a little family, da 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 da. And then this is what happens. This is this is the graph that is probably most like what I used to do, is like a lot of work and then a lot of family and then a lot of work, and I just always feel like so off kiltered. And he actually has a model that works better. He actually recommends work-life counterbalancing. So with work, he says we have to choose extreme. If we do this little like da-da-da-da-da, this tiny little, we're never going to be able to get the work results that we need. But life, you can't really do that at the extremes. So this graph that he made is saying that you should keep your life tight, right? But then work, you go to extremes. I hope this is making sense to you, because this like blew my mind when I heard about it. And I'm like, why didn't I know about this sooner? In his novel, Suzanne's Diary for Nicholas, which does not sounds like a fiction book that you will not learn anything from, but James Patterson artfully highlights where our priorities lie in our personal and professional balancing act. Imagine life is a game in which you're juggling 5 balls. The balls are called work, family, health, friends, and integrity. And you're keeping all of them in the air, but one day you finally come to understand that work is a rubber ball, as in if you drop it, it will bounce back. But the other 4 balls, family, health, friends, integrity, are made of glass. Wow. An extraordinary life is a counterbalancing act, not a work-life balance. All right, so this next part is about focus. Voltaire once wrote, "Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers." Sir Francis Bacon added, "A prudent question is one half of wisdom," and Indira Gandhi concluded that the power to question is the basis of all human progress. And here's some science. Research shows that asking questions improves learning and performance by as much as 150%. So do not feel bad when you're known as the girl who asks too many questions. And this is interesting too. One of the most empowering moments of my life, the author says, came when I realized that life is a question and how we live is our answer. So what is the one thing? It is a focusing question. So anyone who dreams of an uncommon life eventually discovers that there is no choice but to seek an uncommon approach to living it. The focusing question is that uncommon approach. The one thing is to ask yourself this question every day when determining what to do. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? Dude, this is gonna be so long. I love this book so much. All right, this part's about productivity and time blocking. This is a quote by Margarita Tartakovsky. "Productivity isn't about being a workhorse, keeping busy, or burning the midnight oil. It's more about priorities, planning, and fiercely protecting your time." Time blocking actually isn't hard, it's protecting it that's hard. The world doesn't know your purpose or priorities and is not responsible for them. So when someone tries to double book you, you say, "I'm sorry, I already have an appointment at that time," and offer other options. If the other person is disappointed, you're sympathetic but ultimately unmoved. I actually thought this part was hilarious. But sometimes the request is real and needs to be done right now, and you must drop what you're doing to do it. In this situation, follow the rule: if you erase, you must replace, and immediately reschedule your time block. In time, others will begin to understand how you work and they will support it. Just watch. It's really amazing how accommodating others are when they see the big picture and they know when they can access you. So this is a section about saying no. When you say yes one time, you usually have to defend it over 1,000 times by saying no to other things. The more things you do, the less successful you are at any one of them, so it really is important that you own in on what you want to do and stay in the lane. You can't be good at all the lanes. Master marketer Seth Godin says, "You can say no with respect and you can say no promptly." So focusing on our own goals to the exclusion of others, especially the causes and the people we value the most, can feel downright selfish and self-centered, but it doesn't have to. I actually wrote on this part, I said, "Damn, that sounds like he has no kids currently." When I set out goals and I'm just working on just that, I definitely get labeled selfish sometimes or like tunnel vision, but that's really how I get to what I need to do. And honestly, a lot of people respect that except for my 6-year-old. He doesn't care. This part is about chaos and being comfortable with it. A lot of people are really not comfortable with chaos. He says, "A not so funny thing happens along the way to extraordinary results: untidiness, unrest, disarray, and disorder. But unfortunately, there is no pause or stop button. It's a package deal. When you strive for greatness, chaos is guaranteed to show up. In fact, other areas of your life may experience chaos in direct proportion to the time you put in on your one thing. It's important for you to accept this instead of fighting it." Oscar-winning filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola warns us that anything you build on large scale or with intense passion invites chaos. In other words, get used to it and get over it. When you commit to your one thing each day, extraordinary results ultimately do occur, and in time, this creates the income or the opportunity to manage that chaos. Another thing that I wrote about chaos is that great art comes from chaos. So to conclude all these different concepts, this is a quote by T.S. Eliot. Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. So this is more just to help you get comfortable with risking so much for your dreams. Is you really this is how you get to what you really want to get to, is by risking a lot. Even if you have a family, even if you have a bunch of other obligations, it's still going to be worth it because of something called regret. This also makes you feel a little bit delusional, especially when you're creating something out of nothing. People are like, that doesn't exist, you can't do that, and the reality is it doesn't, and you don't know while you're doing it if it is going to work. So you feel a little bit crazy, but you really have to get through that part to be able to create something that doesn't exist. It's just, I don't know any other way, but I guess maybe there is. Go live a life worth living where in the end, you'll be able to say, I'm glad I did it, and not, I wish I had. The one thing is real. If you put in the work, it will work. And that is everything that I have to say about the one thing. I think it's absolutely important that you read this no matter what your industry is, especially if you want to create something out of nothing and you want to be the most productive person that you know. Have a great day.